Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Amine album, Limbo. Amine is a Portland-based MC. He's been at it for a few years now, who, for a while now, I've wanted to enjoy, mostly because a lot of the singles leading up to his debut project, Good For You, I enjoyed quite a bit. Especially Yellow. I really love that track. However, the rest of the album I thought was mediocre in a big way. I thought Amine was just really phoning it in. I did, however, see a ton of potential, which I thought he capitalized on so much more in 2018 with his next project, 1.5. Now, this was far from perfect. When it was bad, it certainly was genuinely awful. That track with G Herbo is really bad. But a lot of the tracks had this very hazy, almost psychedelic tinge to it, and in hip-hop, that's something that I can really get with right now. I thought that Amine really did well with it as well. Now, call me nutty. I have genuinely loved a lot of the singles leading up to this new album. I've been very excited to chat about it. Let's do it. This album starts off with Burden, and right off the bat, I think it's safe to say we are dealing with an entirely different dude here. Between the very dreary beat and the very hip soul sample, there's a very introspective and almost jazzy sound. But outside of that, from the very timely lyrics to his genuinely focused performance, I feel like Amine sounds like an entirely new dude. It's just very raw, very in-your-face, very grisly. I mean, he certainly has done a lot to get him out of that hazy funk that he was in here a couple of years ago with, and honestly, I think he sounds great right from the get-go. More than anything, I think someone's been growing up quite a bit. Now, as far as a standard banger goes, Woodlawn is much more straightforward, but not in a bad way. I think it's great. In a way, it reminds me a lot of what would have shown up on his 1.5 project. The cloud rap feel here is certainly strong. However, the way he's carrying himself these days is so much more charismatic, and I love it. Then we have Roots featuring JID and Charlie Wilson, and the introspective way that this album continues to roll, I think is like a real hot streak right now. There are some seriously awesome one-liners here, and the jazzy influences continue to be a knockout. The fact that this is even the same guy is genuinely shocking. I love the big, tragic chorus from Charlie Wilson here, and some of the wordplay later on in the track is an awesome addition as well. And JID honestly sounds pretty damn right at home here. Now, Compensating, featuring Young Thug, I was actually kind of worried about from a distance. I wasn't feeling the beat at first, and honestly, I've always been very up in the air on Young Thug. But for a hip, more modern sounding track, I think this is actually really good. Amine sounds right at home on this beat, even with his sort of sleepy-eyed performance. And Young Thug's charisma is an absolute wonder here. Honestly, it's not in the same vein as a lot of other tracks here, but it really sticks out to me still. It sounds great. And more than anything, it breaks up the album really nicely. And honestly, Shimmy might be my favorite track here. It's explosive and in your face, and he sounds more animated here than I think I've ever heard him. The ODB sampling also isn't that bad either. But it's just so gritty, and Amine sounds just so fired up, and I genuinely love that. Now, I will say this, I still think he has a lot of growing up to do if he's going to make a real knockout album overall. The Kobe interlude definitely has a place on this album, but I think that it really should have been incorporated in Woodlawn somehow, but that's just me. Can't decide, I feel like a lot of others will like, but not me. I'm not really that into it. Personally, I think it's a step back for the album. This, to me, just kind of sounds like a really great track from Good For You, or a pretty decent one from 1.5. And yeah, that's okay, it's decent, but it's just a little too absent-minded for me. I think he could do a lot better. He's proven that on a lot of this album. But if you are a fan of his early stuff, I think you'll probably like this a lot more than me. Pressure in My Palms featuring Vince Staples and Slow Tie honestly was a letdown for me. With my absolute love of Slow Tie and Vince Staples and just how fired up Amine sounds on this album, this was a surefire, real wild track from a distance. But this beat is really dime a dozen, and honestly, it doesn't really fit the feel of this album. Not only that, but I worry here that Amine is really floating back into bad habits. I mean, Vince and Slow Tie actually sound freaking awesome. They sound fired up to be here. But the second half of this track is just phoned in. I just expected a lot more from these three. Sadly, he kind of loses me again with Mama. And you know what? I'm just going to say it. I don't think the idea of Amine doing a ballad on this album is really a bad one. I actually think on paper it sounds great. You know what doesn't sound great though? His singing. Also, compared to a lot of the other tracks here, I'm sorry, but this is just so corny. It's just not really living up to the rest of the album. That's just me though. And I have a lot of the same feelings towards Becky. Once again, on paper, this track sounds like a good idea. But this one for me is patience testing and overly cheesy, honestly. I thought we were past a lot of this. And you know what? I'm gonna say it. I think his singing on this track is actually great. Compared to Mama, this track is a whole lot better performed. But between the lyrics and the overly dramatic vibe, it's not cutting it in my book. Now, while the rest of the album isn't perfect, I think Amine's growth in the last couple of years is really commendable. Riri is one of the tracks that really swayed me into reviewing this album. I love this, I really do. It's kind of got a moody, almost Tyler the Creator, Flower Boy vibe to it. But outside of that, it's business as usual. And honestly, this sort of jazzy, introspective MC, I think Amine really fits the bill. And I never thought I'd be saying that. I love the airier, bluesier vibes to Easy featuring Summer Walker. This is one just really super nice, laid back, chilled out tune. And you know what? You could argue that this track's maybe a little too hazy, a little bit too psychedelic. But you know what? I think this album needed a track like this. And say what you will, I think Amine and Summer Walker have some really great chemistry on this track. He even ends off the album pretty well. First off, we have Fetus featuring Injury Reserve. And this is a track that I was excited for going into it because, man, Jailbreak the Tesla last year, Injury Reserve and Amine, honestly, one of my favorite rap singles of the year. And I'll be honest, this is the wild track that I did not see coming on this album. This is so much more experimental and grislier than I could have ever imagined. It's practically industrial in part. For now, this works. I worry about him trying more stuff like this in the future, but for now, hey, this is pretty cool, man. And I had my worries about My Reality. I did. I thought that super cheesy auto-tune chorus that starts off this track was going to lead down a really dark road. But the rest of this track is really focused and, most importantly, Amine sounds completely refreshed. I love the jazzy flow to this as well. It almost in a really weird way reminds me of what I enjoyed so much about Lupe Fiasco in his early days. And honestly, it ends off this album on a really great note, so much so I'm not that worried about Amine's future. So you know what? Going into this album, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't think I was going to like it. How could I have never really enjoyed a piece of work from Amine in the past? However, he has grown so much. No longer is he selling himself short and clinging to modern hip-hop stereotypes. Honestly, I think here he sounds refreshed and focused and really pulls off this sort of jazzy, introspective sound really well. It's just a very refreshing album, especially in the catalog of Amine. I am feeling a strong 7 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.